it's just deciding whether to stay in or stay out. Anybody of us who've ever had pets, we know exactly how that works. So I'm gonna so real quick on the pre-ramble. I just made Twitch affiliate, so this is a little bit new to me. I'm gonna get a recording of this, so I don't have to say this over and over all the time. But I wasn't quite sure what it was gonna look like the first time around. So if you see a little heart down there below you, you hit that. That's just the follow button. I always appreciate it. It makes it easier to find me again. There is a subscribe button. I'm not a big fan of asking people for money. However, if you do have an Amazon Prime account, you do get one free Twitch subscription that you can use every month. If you want to throw that at me, I will not complain. And then don't do it right now, but also if you click on the About, that's going to give you links to all of my social media, Twitter, all that stuff. My name is Edward. I go by Gryftkin, but that's just because, when I started this Twitter handle or this Twitch handle, I was playing games. I wasn't talking to people, so. And also, obviously, I didn't say the word Gryftkin multiple times before I decided that was a good username. All right, but what we're here for, author Ian Rogers has a huge selection of short story horror books. I cannot believe that it took me so long to discover you. I've finally realized how long you've been writing. I'm one of those unfortunate people where I go in shifts. I read everything, but I go in shifts. And I think my last big horror burst was probably in the late 80s, early 90s. Basically anything Robert McCammon put out, I read. So I'm actually getting back into horror because of you. I started with Shards. I think I told you already. I just love the book. I almost don't have any questions because I thought it was so perfectly written.
Well, thank you very much.
It was good. It's like, this is the other thing, and I've told some of the authors that I've been talking to recently, not to be a snob, but I never really got into short stories because if it was a really good book, I wanted more.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read some short stories now, and especially something like Shards, where I'm like, no, this was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't have made it any longer without making up filler.
My wife would totally agree with you. She is not a fan of short stories, although she would tell you that she was sort of ruined for short stories with her English degree, where they sort of just analyzed them to death and sort of took the joy out of it for her. So she is sort of like the consummate book buyer, where she loves novels. She's not a big short story or a short story collection fan, but yeah, the funny thing for me is I don't write a lot of short stories anymore. They want to go long. So Shards was, I think, about 9,000 words. And once you go past 5,000 words, there's not a lot of places you can really sell it to. But fortunately, Ellen Datlow took that one. And it just, yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. I was trying to do something really different with the cabin in the woods type story. So something sort of subversive without being too gimmicky, like I think a gimmick doesn't last. A gimmick is sort of like a line and people realize it has no substance. So I wanted to do something that had more substance. So I thought, well, what if I told a cabin in the woods story, but the story actually starts after they've already experienced the horrible things at the cabin. And the story is really about what happens to them when they go home. And it's sort of like a supernatural PTSD story of the trauma. And you obviously there's flashes and there's intros of what happened at the cabin, but largely it's in the past. So I really wanted to focus on one character because I think, especially in horror, all plot is stuff happening to characters that you've been made to care about. So I thought you had to really care about these people. I didn't want them to be sort of sort of dispensable, teen characters from a slasher movie. We've seen all those people before, and whenever we watch those types of movies, we're usually rooting for the killer because the characters are usually so awful or so one note. So I was trying to give these characters a bit more substance, a bit more character, as much as you can in a 9,000 word story. But again, even then, you don't want to sort of overstay your welcome. So I sort of had this end point where I wanted to reach it and sort of say, hey, now it's done. I think you have enough that people will say you got to know these people, but you didn't want to stretch it out into a novella or much less a novel. I think that would have been stretching it way, way too thin.
I also love the fact that you mentioned it was kind of a PTSD story.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of those people, even though they all experience the same thing, it's a different piece of it that haunts them,
Mm-hmm.
which I really appreciated. It's not like everybody's going through the same thing, like most slasher flicks. Somebody's just going around, everybody's trying to kill each other. Yours was like, it wasn't even necessarily that it was trying to kill them. It was just how it affected them and their almost. I think it's more of a psychological thriller type thing to me.
Well, it's
That
the
might be
way that
considered horror horror.
it's the way the word like haunted gets thrown around so much that we think immediately of ghosts, but like people are haunted by things all the time. It's haunting just means memory, like a memory of something that bothers you, that disturbs you in some way. So there is an argument that could be said that a lot of the stuff that was happening to them after the cabin was only in their heads, and they sort of did these things themselves uh, because of the trauma that they endured. So it's something that I mean, I still believe that there's very much a supernatural explanation for this story, but I'm
Mhm.
saying from a certain perspective, you could say that um, it's either all in their head or it's really just an exploration of trauma and grief, of course, because it's one of their friends has also died. It's not just the horrible things that have happened to them, but it's the horrible things that have happened to a beloved friend who didn't survive the experience. You know.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, like I said, excellent, excellent book. By the way, we wouldn't have been able to tell you were Canadian until you said about. I
It's funny because I was just talking to someone about that last time, and I never feel like I'm saying a boot, and but see, people seem to hear it. And what I've heard, someone who actually works in linguistics told me that it's half of how I'm speaking it and half of how you're hearing it,
Mhm.
because I generally don't feel like I'm saying a boot. And it was funny. I've talked to other Canadians, and we never really understood where the about thing comes from. It was like I've never heard anyone. I don't feel like I'm saying about, in a strange way, but who knows, right? I mean,
No,
it's
no, there's a bit of an accent, and I tease because my wife grew up in Minnesota, so that's
right.
one of those words that she kind of says the same way. She doesn't
Mm,
sound Minnesotan until she pulls it out. I actually loved a meme too. I saw one time. It's like it was a cartoon. Actually, I should say it was a cartoon. It's like what they think we say, and it was a picture of a boat, and what we're really
right.
saying is a picture of a boot. And so it's
Right.
like, it was one way or the other, and I always thought it was kind of funny. But that does lead me to another question.
Mm,
You're Canadian. You're
yes,
supposed
I
to be a
am.
nice guy. What are you doing writing horror stories?
Well, that's the hook, though, right? I mean, we're very unassuming that way, so
Don't see
it's
you
one of the
coming.
things I always think of. One of the things I like about, or I've always liked about Shirley Jackson is uh, not just being a woman working in this genre at a time when women were not writing that sort of thing, but even when she was writing those types of stories, people don't even really realize how subversive she was. She wasn't publishing her stories in Amazing Stories or Twilight Zone magazine. She was publishing her stories in like Good Housekeeping. Like I'm convinced that a lot of the editors who published her stuff had no idea that like the Demon Lover was about this story or the Summer People was about that story. It's just she was such a good writer that I think maybe a lot of the themes and elements in her story went over a lot of people's heads at that time, because it's darker in a very under current sort of a way that I think people are just not really aware of. I mean, people know The Lottery. I mean, that's the story that everyone sort of knows. And even then, there's a great quote from her where she talks about the number of people who thought that the woman was going to win a washer and dryer set by the end of the story. Like it's such a slam finish there with a surprise ending, that's what she's sort of known for. But that that sort of domestic horror, suburban horror, is a thread through all of her work. It's what makes her so incredible. So I think being Canadian in that way, and people think that we're all polite or we're all sort of you know um, friendly that way, which is not a bad thing as far as reputations go, stereotypes go.
Yeah.
It actually makes it more surprising that we can actually do like really effective horror, because there's lots of great horror writers up here. There's like Gemma Files, one of our best writers, and her stuff is just messed up in the best way. It's an incredible writer, and dark, 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 dark.
Oh yeah. And I say that teasingly. I know you can't brush everybody with the same paintbrush and stuff like that, but it's just one of those things. It's such a stereotype. And like I said, it's a good stereotype. There's absolutely nothing wrong. There's bad stereotypes, but it's such a good stereotype that you just as and this is probably just me being an American. It's like a horror writer from Canada. They gave us Ryan Reynolds. Come on now. No, I'm just kidding. I see. I see. Oop, the cat. So I was seeing the cat go back there behind you.
Oh yeah, he's
So
new.
I'm obviously going to have some questions about some of the books I read. Some of the ones, though, that were a little bit harder to find. I did
Mhm.
have a question if there's anything that you wanted to tell people about the Felix Wren Blacklands, because that one was just, I'm super interested in it. I just haven't been able to get my hands on any. at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like the reason why the Blacklands stories haven't really broken through in a big way, there's two reasons, and one of them is that to date, it's mostly been short stories and sort of novellas, many of which are in like magazines that aren't in print anymore, or chapbooks that are out of print from publishers that are out of print. So they're kind of scattered. I've been doing the stories for over 10 years now, but to really anchor the series, you have to have like a book, you know?
Mm.
And there was a collection of Felix Wren novellas. I'd collected all the chapbooks and I had done a fourth book to sort of tie them all together. So it was like a collection of 4 novellas called Supernatural Tales, which is just supernatural and noir, because that's what the stories are. And the press that did them, Burning Effigy, they did a fantastic job. It was an awesome cover art, but the book, the press went out of business like 2 months after the book came out. And the book also came out on the heels of my first collection, Every House is Haunted, which probably wasn't the best move. That was my idea. It wasn't the publisher's mistake. That was my mistake. So I think Every House is Haunted kind of overshadowed this book. It's why you don't release books kind of back to back. You like to leave at least a few months, if not a year, between book releases. So I think between those two things, no one really saw Supernatural Tales. Which is too bad, because I'm really proud of that book, and it was going to be the introduction to the Blacklands novel series. So I've written one Felix Wren novel to date called Sycamore, and I've started the second one. And my agent is sort of in the process of trying to sell them right now. And the problem with a series, especially like a horror series, is that, and I'm talking primarily about the Big Five imprints. First of all, the Big Five doesn't publish a ton of horror. There's really only a handful of imprints that publish horror these days. So you're already sort of skating uphill on that one. And then the fact that you're trying to do a series, some of the rejections that we received for Sycamore to date, they really like the book, but because it's a series, they can't commit to it. And that's really the problem with a series, is unless you're going to get buy-in from the editor and everyone up the ladder that they have to send it to get approval, because it's never one person at the publisher. It's not like the editor says, I want this, and then they buy it. They got to send it to acquisitions, and then they got to send to all these other people, and they have to check your previous sales. And there's the money people, and then there's the art people. So it's a big battle to get a book sold by a Big Five publisher. And if everyone doesn't love this book and thinks it can make a lot of money, they don't want to buy it. And if they think it's part of a series and they don't all love the series, a series just looks like a commitment they don't want to make. So you need to find that publisher who wants the book and loves the series and wants everything. We want the novel, we want the short stories, we want the novellas, we want to be in the Blacklands business. So it's a much bigger animal to try to sell than a novel. So that's something that I've learned through the agenting process and working with Big Five publishers and editors who've been great. Like I said, they love the book. There hasn't been anyone who's been really critical of it, but the fact that it's a series, that it's sort of horror, urban fantasy, it's just a bridge too far for all of them so far. And then you think about, well, what about all the other horror series that are being published today? And there aren't any. There are horror
I
books
was
that
trying
are
to think of one. Yeah,
name one. The closest one that you really get are like the Dresden Files, Jim Butcher's series, which is fantasy. It's not
right.
horror.
Yeah, I don't.
And then maybe Laurel K. Hamilton's her Vampire Hunter series. But again, that's more paranormal romance, which is its own sort of a thing. Again, nothing wrong with them, but mine is more super, like that's why I call them supernatural noirs or supernaturals, because it owes as much to the detective genre of like Ross MacDonald and Dashiell Hammett and Robert B. Parker as it does to the horror genre. It's I really love those genres so much that I really wanted to mash them together. And until you really find someone who's in love with it, they just don't see it, and that's fine. I mean, it really is like dating, where I've met lots of great editors. I've met lots of really nice people. I just haven't found the one yet. And it was like when I was looking for my agent, you're looking for the one who really gets you, who's going to make your work better, who's going to champion your work. And my agent is really fantastic and really does that. So now we're just trying to find the other piece, because if you get an editor, then you sort of have this in, right? They want your stuff, they want to help you develop your stuff, but right now you're sort of just knocking on that door and trying to get in. But I am hopeful that the Blacklands will find a home somewhere, because I'm still writing the stories. Even my next big story coming out in Ellen Datlow's collection, anthology, Screams from the Dark. It's actually Tor Nightfire's first anthology, the new Nightfire imprint. and it's a massive book, and it's a really, really incredible list of contributors. I'm really excited to be with these people. These are like the heavy hitters of horror that are in here. And my story is a Blacklands story. And Ellen, she told me that she thought that my story was the perfect story to sort of introduce the book. So that's why she put it at the very beginning of the anthology. And that was really cool for me because I've never had that before. I've been in lots of anthologies and I've never been the first story. So to have that with a big, high profile anthology like this, and the fact that it's a Blacklands story, I think that it'll give it some good attention. I'm hopeful.
No, yeah, I'm hoping to grab some traction. I'm also going to have to make note of that. I didn't realize that you did have a collection on the Blacklands. I know it's going to be hard to find, but I may have to poke my head out for that because I'm really interested. Because I loved the 8 series. I obviously haven't been able to haven't been able to get all of them. Some of them are older, but I did love that series. I read the Go Fish one, obviously. That one was quite interesting. I was wondering where you're going with that one. Unfortunately, I didn't read the original. I didn't realize it was the second. Or feel like, is it the second one in the series?
Yeah, that's the second one. The first one is the house on Ashley Avenue, which is
Ashley Avenue,
in Every House is Haunted. Yeah. So yeah, the good thing with those early ones is that you don't really need to have read them in order. I mean, there's only 2 really. Right. There's other stories that sort of bump up against the Miraveau group and the 8. There's a few other stories in Every House is Haunted where there are characters who refer to this group, and I'm pretty sure that I removed the actual name of the insurance company because I didn't want to confuse people that were reading the collection. They might think that it was like a mosaic novel or something, so I downplayed those connections. But they are technically Miraveau group stories. But the 8 is obviously 8 stories, or what will be 8 stories, which is the House on Ashley Avenue, Go Fish, and then the ones that I'm working on now, which they're going to tell the whole story of the Miraveau group and the 8. So it's actually going to be 7 stories, and then the 8th is actually going to be probably a short novel, which will cap off that story with those characters. And yeah, the plan is to collect those into a book one day, and I'll call it the 8 or something. So
that was actually one of my questions. So you've already beaten me to that one, so that one is going to work.
Well, the idea is that I think instead of doing each individual story where they're focusing on a different house, they will sort of do that. But because it's a story with these characters and the arc of these characters and their own personal journey, I'm not really planning on selling or on publishing the stories individually after maybe the 3rd or the 4th one, because by then it'll be like reading chapter 4 or 5 of a book that people haven't read the first 4 chapters. So I'm thinking that there's going to be a point, maybe even after the 3rd one, where I feel like to really do these characters justice, so it doesn't feel like a reboot every time I write one of their stories and have to provide all this backstory, it really is going to end up being like a mosaic novel, which is like a novel told through short stories or novellas. So it's I think the 8 collection will be a big book, but I think it's going to be a good one. It'll feel like you could read them as individual stories, that with this big capper of a story at the end, which is just going to have, I'm just going to throw in everything that I know about haunted houses. It's going to be a big haunted house mashup.
Nice. I was like, I'm kicking myself now. I can't remember if it was Toby or Tony, but I'd like to see whether they strangle him or not, because I know that the end of Go Fish, he was getting on everybody's nerves.
I will tell you a funny story about him. Ellen Datlow hated that character when I first sent her that story, and she was like, I'll buy the story from you, but you have to make this character much less irritating. So I mean, he's obviously supposed to be obnoxious, but that's the problem, is that when you're doing a character that's like that, the danger is that you make him so irritating that people don't like him. So all I can say is he was a lot worse than the original draft.
Gotcha. Because I thought he wasn't that bad, but yeah, I can see that. So you toned him down a little bit.
Yeah, well, and the funny thing is, talking about the other stories, the next one that I'm working on, he's in it, but he's mellowed a bit. He is from his experiences in the second one, and this is why I'm saying that after a while you can't really read them individually. You have to read them as part of the collection, because Toby that you see in this 3rd story is very different from the Toby that you see in the second one. He has grown, but he's also, again, there's some trauma there. Like, these aren't just sort of like comic book characters where they don't carry anything with them from their previous encounters. So they had this horrible encounter with this entity in Go Fish, and you need to see the scars from that. You need to see the emotional effectiveness that's the emotion that's affected them, even as psychics, even as operatives of this company. They're still young. They're him and Sally. They're both in their early 20s, and this would be traumatic for anybody. So I really want to carry that through because I think that's what makes the characters more believable, you know, and more realistic, and you're more invested in them. You're more invested
That's
in what
exactly
they're
what I
doing.
was thinking. You care more about them, and you don't
Yeah.
want these two-dimensional characters. And I think if you keep the whole basis of who they are the same throughout, I mean, there's got to be that core that makes them them.
Mhm.
But things have to affect them, or at some point you're just like, yeah,
Yeah, you just don't
whatever.
care. Well, and I think that was literally that's the story that I'm working on right now. And they're at a meeting at the very beginning. They're watching like a really grisly PowerPoint presentation, and Sally is expecting, she's waiting for Toby to make a crack, and he's not, and she's surprised that he's not cracking wise. And that was my way of being able to say it was probably this thing that had happened to them, 6 months ago or however long the fish was. But that was my way of being able to touch on that and to explain that at the same time, Toby is not the Toby that you knew from before. He's mellowed a bit, he's maybe matured a bit, or he's still suffering some trauma, maybe all the above. It's what makes these characters interesting. You write an interesting character and then you grow and develop them by having, unfortunately, usually horrible things happening to them. But that's the business,
Well,
right? When
you
you're
are
writing
writing
horror.
horror stories, so I mean, it's
Exactly.
there's probably not a happy, ever after on some of these.
Hmm.
Um, and I apologize, I keep drinking some. Of course, now I've been fine all day. Now I get a tickle in my throat because that's just how life works. What was the other? Oh, the other one, and I'm going to tease you just a little bit on this one.
Mm.
I told you that I felt like Go Fish was like, or not Go Fish, Shards was like the perfect ending. You couldn't really add anything else to this story, but you couldn't take anything away from it either.
Mm.
I am still trying to make up my mind about you can't save them all.
Mm.
I am so stuck between that was the perfect ending and no, I need to know more. And I
Well,
have
it's
not
funny.
figured out which side of the fence I've landed on yet.
I can't talk about it too much because I will make sure I will track down a copy. I will make sure you get a copy of Supernatural Tales, but I can't even mention the story that I want you to read. But it's a Blacklands story,
Mhm.
and you don't need to have read the other ones obviously to enjoy it because that's the way I write all of these stories. And I can talk a bit more about that later and how I write these stories to make them stand alone, but also work as something larger than a whole. That's one where I feel like it stands on its own, but I think I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like you might be more satisfied if you got this other connection. But again, I can't even say it without
No, no. No
blowing a big
spoilers. We don't want to
spoiler.
do any
No,
spoilers.
no, exactly. And I think it's one of these things where I think it's just really satisfying for you because even when I was telling people that it was a Blackland story and they said, "Oh, is it a Felix story?" I was like, "No, no, Felix isn't in this one. This is one of my standalone ones because it's a whole world. It's not just one character." And that was my idea, was that there are multiple characters. There are Felix novels. There are non-Felix novels. There's novels with other characters that are going to recur too. But the way I pitched it to my agent and the way my agent pitches it to publishers is that it's a supernatural version of The Wire, where it's the world that's the recurring character, the same way that in The Wire it's Baltimore, it's the city that's the recurring character, where the characters in each season come and go, right? So in my world, it's the Blacklands is the recurring character, and Felix is in it for a little while, and then you get this other character, and then sometimes it's just a bunch of random characters because I just want to be able to tell this other story with these characters I'm never going to discuss again. So with You Can't Save Them All, I was trying to do two things. I was trying to bring back something that was a really popular subject from the Blacklands that people really, really liked. So I wanted to do another story with that element. I said very vaguely because I'm trying not to spoil anything. And I really wanted to do a story about social work because my stepmother, she just retired, spent 30 years in the as a caseworker for the Children's Aid Society here,
Nice.
and I really wanted to do something about what the work was like, and the fact that even though you know that the laws and everything is kind of stacked against you, I mean, a lot of those speeches that the one her coworker gives are speeches that I've heard my stepmother give, and that you don't get embittered to it, but you have to build like a callus, or else the job will just eat you alive. It's that kind of work. And my father was in the RCMP for 30 years, so it's sort of like the same thing where it's just you have to be sort of inured to that type of work, or else you're just not going to last. And it's not about being bitter. It's not about being desensitized to it, but you have to have the right machinery to do it. And sometimes you don't know until you're doing it. You say, "Hey, I did this for a year or two. This isn't for me." Sometimes you just can't know. And my dad and my stepmother have both seen people in their respective fields sort of come and go at it. And then some people just do it, you know, for as long as they did, if not longer, because they can do it. But it's something that I knew that I couldn't do. It's
Mm.
that's why I've got so much respect for people who do that type of work, or any type of work that I can do. It's just I think that there's a lot of work out there that you just don't really understand what people go through. And for me, I wanted to do this story about social workers and sort of a view into what they really deal with on a day by day basis.
Yeah, I did love the character of Dee Dee. I feel like that was very much
Mhm.
a kind of a rock of the story, even though it wasn't about her.
Right.
So I buried the lead a little bit just because I wanted to talk about some of your books. Because in the next subject, I know there's only going to be so much you can talk about.
Mhm.
Some people may have heard of this guy, maybe done a couple of B-list movies. Sam Raimi. I think he's doing the Doctor Strange movie right now. Uh, and it's at first when I heard it, it took me a second, but then I had to remember, as a director, he's done Spider-Man, he's done Doctor Strange, stuff like that. But we also forget, as a producer, I mean, he's done The Grudge, he's done the Poltergeist reboot, he's done The
Mhm.
Evil Dead. Some people may have heard of that.
Mhm.
Um, he picked up an option as to produce one of your stories.
Yeah, he what happened, sort of the long story short, was there was a producer, Roy Lee, who also produced The Ring and The Grudge, as well, all these movies. He um, he was a big fan of Every House is Haunted, and he really loved the house on Ashley Avenue. He loved the idea of this insurance company sort of secretly investigating the supernatural, and this idea of the eight, these haunted properties that are so paranormally polluted that they have to be left empty. They're off the grid. They can't destroy them for whatever supernatural reason. There is a reason. I don't cop out on that. I just haven't really explained it yet because you don't want to reveal all your secrets in the first couple of stories. But there is a reason. Um, and he just really liked the story. So I met with him in Toronto. This was years ago, 2013 or 2014. And at that time, he got NBC Universal to option it because the idea was they were going to do a TV show. He had done lots of movies, and he had done one TV show. He had done Bates Motel, and he wanted to get into TV more. So he thought this would make a great TV show, cable TV show. So Universal optioned it for a few years, and then they just let the option lapse. I can't remember how long. So then, as you said, Raimi was producing the Poltergeist remake, and he was doing it with Roy. And I think that might have been how they met. And then Roy basically said to Raimi, "I got this story that I really like. I could never make a run of it as a TV show. Maybe you want to try it as a movie." So Raimi read the story and really liked it. So he reached out to me, asked me if I had the rights back, and I did. And then I just mentioned that, this story is actually connected to other stories in my collection. So he said, "Well, then send me the whole book." So I sent him Every House is Haunted, and he decided to option all of the stories in the book. So yeah, I sat on that for like 2 years, and then it was just last year they announced they were able to sell it to. There was a bidding war for it once they had a script and a director, and Netflix got it. So yeah, I mean, it's been a crazy wild ride. So it's supposed to go into production the next few months. COVID has just slowed everything down.
Oh,
That's all I can
oh
say.
yeah, I mean,
I mean, it's just like, I mean, it's still happening. I mean, I mean, they just renewed the option recently because I mean, it was just like you have an option for like a year or 18 months,
right.
and the time just goes by, right? So I mean, they just renewed that fairly recently, which obviously tells you that they're still interested. I'm in contact with everyone because I'm actually working on the movie as a consultant. So I'm in the loop on all these things, which is great. Because again,
Mhm.
they don't have to do that. Usually, they just buy the rights from the writer and they go on and do their thing, which I would have been totally happy with too. But Rainey's been really, really gracious, and he provided a blurb for the reprint of Every House is Haunted, which is going to be coming out this October,
Okay.
which is fantastic. Cemetery Dance is doing it. I'm so excited. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's sort of like a dream come true. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge Sam Raimi fan. I've loved his work since the original Evil Dead. I'm a massive Spider-Man fan, so I love his Spider-Man movies, like the Gift. Like
Mhm.
he's done so many great, like Darkman, Army of Darkness. There's just so many great movies that he's done over the years. And obviously, I'm super pumped about him doing the new Doctor Strange movie. When I heard it was going to be a horror movie, sort of like a horror MCU movie, and that was the reason why they reached out to him, I was like, perfect. I mean, just doing a bonkers. I mean, when you see like the old like Steve Ditko, like Doctor Strange artwork
Mhm.
and how like demons and portals, everything there, it's like though the only way you can capture that in a film is with crazy Sam Raimi camera moves. You know, it's just like it's going to be it's a match made in the multiverse. You know,
I'm a huge Marvel fan myself too. So
yeah.
if it gives it away, my daughter named her dogs Rogue and Remy. So you know.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, I've got a family of nerds going on over here too. So man, now everybody's going to be trying to figure out how to find that book without the movie cover, though. I used to work at a bookstore. I said nobody ever wants the movie cover.
Well, and the funny thing is that, you know, like you go online, like no one wants the Netflix sticker on. Like for me, it's a marketing thing, so it helps sell the book, and other people don't want that. So like I totally understand that.
Hey,
and the book is Barnabas is here. He was going to make a preview eventually. That's my cat.
Trust me, I've seen Sean and McGuire's cat. I've seen John Lyon's cat. I think to be a writer, you have to have either a cat or a dog, preferably a cat.
Well,
and they need to show up at least once during an interview.
He gets more likes and, you know, Facebook retweet or Twitter retweets and stuff than any of my material whenever I post a picture of him. So it's like next time I need to post like that Netflix news with a picture of the cat, and then it'll go even more viral. So it's everyone likes the pictures of the cats. What can I say?
Say if there's a cat in the movie, maybe you can get him a slot in there too. You know?
Well, I think you'll get in there before I do. I mean, they said if they film it in Toronto, they'll throw me in the background somewhere. So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, they do like every once in a while you throw an author in there. It's like only the person that knows the author goes, "Hey, I know who that is."
Exactly, exactly.
But hey,
no,
it's pretty cool. A Screen Actors Guild thing, right? It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. It's just being when you see your name up there on that credit where you're sort of sharing it with Sam Raimi. I mean, it's I don't even think about, oh, that's going to be good for my career, even though I'm sure it will be. It's just like, for me, it's just, it really is a dream come true. I'm such a Raimi fan. Like when I told my sister, she started crying, and the first thing she said was mom would have been so proud.
Oh, man.
And it was just like, it wasn't just because my mom has since passed. She passed like 20 years ago, but it was the fact that she was the horror influence in our lives. She was the one that let us watch horror movies when we were a kid. So she would have known who Sam Raimi was. She would have, this is the movie that she would have let us watch if we were kids, you know? So it's not just something that's good for my career, or, you know, it's going to make you some money, whatever. It's just on a very personal level. It just, it really means something to me. And the fact that I didn't like seek him out, it was like he sought me out, you know. It's pretty cool, you know. It's something that that, you know, even if the movie tanks or even the movie just doesn't end up happening, I'll still have, you know, like that blurb for my book. I'll still have the messages that we've swapped. I mean, a week after I signed the contract, he sent me a signed Evil Dead poster, you know, like an original Evil Dead poster, just talking about, you know, hey, I'm really excited to be working with you on your excellent book, you know, Sam Raimi. So it was just like, I still look at it and I still can't believe it sometimes. It's one of these things that I pass in my office all the time, but it still sort of blows my mind that, yeah, Sam Raimi knows who I am and he's a fan of my work. And that's pretty cool. You know, that's pretty exciting.
Am I missing any of you? Because said a lot of your short stories and stuff are all part of the series. I don't think did I miss any books, anything else that you wanted to talk about book wise?
No, I mean, those were the two. And like I said, Every House is Haunted will be back out this October. It'll be the 10-year anniversary of when it first came out, which really just says like, I really need to get more books out. The problem is that I've written 4 or 5 novels, but it's really hard, especially when you're pitching exclusively to the big 5. It's really hard to sell horror. It's hard to sell genre, and especially when you haven't sold anything else to the big 5. So I'm really, on the one hand, I'm sort of a seasoned veteran in the sense that I've had lots of short stories published. I've done a couple of books in the small press, but to the big 5, it's like I'm starting all over from scratch, right? It's just there really is a feeling right now of kind of restarting my career. Now that I've got this, the Netflix news and everything to capitalize on. And I don't really care about that. I mean, I love to write and I just really want to build a readership. It's the reason why I like the small presses that have like good distribution, because you want to make sure you get the books in people's hands, and just people that are making them like affordable too. Like a lot of small presses are like the specialty presses that do like collector's editions and the fancy hardcovers, which I like. I own hundreds of them, but the collector's market and the reader's market are not necessarily the same thing. The collector's market are readers too, but you're not going to get a big readership by just publishing exclusively with the collectors markets, because the books are like 50, 100, $200. They're limited runs of like 200, 300 copies. They're for the collectors. I'm trying to build a readership. I want to have a big following. So I try to go with the publishers who have the wider reach, and you're just trying to be smart with it that way. This is why I love working with Ellen Datlow and her collections, and obviously Tor.com, because it's a massive reach. It's a major website. People can read it for free, or you can buy it online for like $1 if you want to read it on an e-reader. So it really, for me, it's been one of the best places to publish stories, because a lot of the stories that aren't in Every House is Haunted, they're in magazines that are dead. You can't even get them anymore, right? So I mean, the magazines, they never really last very long. So I'm really just trying to find a way to get my stories into people's hands as easily as possible.
Oh, exactly. That was my biggest frustration, because every time I read something from a different series, I'm like, well, now I want to read the rest of these, and I'm looking and like go to a magazine, it's like out of print, out of print, out of print. It's like,
yeah.
And
Well,
the
plan now is to the next thing on deck is to find a home for the Blacklands, and I think because of this sort of eye-opening experience with the Big Five, and the fact that the Big Five probably wouldn't be the best home for the Blacklands, because what would end up probably happening is I sell one Felix Wren novel, or they buy it, and like maybe they buy 2 of them, like a 2-book deal. And if the first one does okay, but the second one doesn't do as well, and because the second book almost of a 2-book deal almost never does as well as your first book, that's just the way it is. It's like second book itis, and then they don't promote it, right? So, and then they walk away. So my fear is that, maybe you get a good deal. They publish a couple of Felix Wren books, but they don't perform the way the publisher wants them to. And so they decide they don't want any more Blacklands books. And now they own the series, and that's it for me writing Blacklands stories. So I think it's better for me to have a smaller, more devoted press that really wants to get behind it. They want to do the novels, they want to do the collections, they want to do chapbooks or novellas, whatever. Because like I have the Felix Wren novel, I've got Sycamore, I've got Supernatural Tales, which is the first 4 Felix Wren stories. It's almost like the prequel to the novel series. It's like, remember in the comic books back in the day, you would have issue number 1, but then sometimes they would have issue number 0, and it would be like a prequel. It would be like the introduction to the series. I always see Supernatural Tales as like Felix Wren issue 0, because it's these 4 novellas. They tell you how he got into the monster game, how he got into taking on supernatural cases, so that by the time Sycamore starts, he's established. But the funny thing about Sycamore is that he doesn't want to take these cases anymore. He's taking what of course he thinks is a regular missing persons case, because he knows that, or he feels anyway, that the more of these supernatural cases that he takes, one day he's just going to get killed by something. It's just like I think the line at one point is, you can't keep dancing with the devil and not expect to get your foot stepped on, or something like that. And it's just that he's good at it. But it's very dangerous work. It's not like adultery work or insurance fraud, right? Like what regular detectives do. So when he comes across a case when a woman is asking him to find her missing husband, he just jumps on it. It's like, well, there's no ghosts, there's no vampires. Absolutely. This is like he jokes that this is like a vacation for him. So it's sort of, by the end of it, of course, he's going to realize that you can't outrun your nature. And this is sort of, especially in a world where the supernatural like just exists, you really can't outrun it. And that he's sort of just destined to do this for however long that he's meant to do it. And that also would speak to the length of the series, because I mean, Robert B. Parker did Spencer books for years. So this is not something that I see as like a duology or a trilogy. I'll do them as long as people want to keep reading about Felix. But then again, like there's other stories within the world with different characters at different walks of life, because Felix is just a Toronto-based private investigator, and this is how he deals with the supernatural. I've got other stories with a character who's actually a friend of Felix's, Jerry Baldwin, and Jerry is a real estate agent, but he only sells haunted properties. So he's like a huckster of haunted real estate. So his stories are a bit lighter. I wouldn't say funny, because nothing is funny in the Blacklands world, but even tonally, the different stories in the world are done. So I would say that Felix's are like supernatural Spencers, and Jerry Baldwin's stories. And I've written a couple, and there's one that's out, but it's out of print right now, called "Possession is 9/10 of the Law." They're all like real estate based. They're a bit lighter. They're sort of urban fantasy ish. And then there's another one with another character who is an agent of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency, which is a government agency that investigates the supernatural. So her series again is very different from the other two, and I would say that they're more procedurals. So they're like I would say Elmore Leonard meets Thomas Harris, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, but with a supernatural twist to them. So they're more higher level, like a almost X-Files ish in their conspiracies, whereas Felix is more friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's helping individuals out with their problems and their interactions on a very personal level, whereas this PI agent, her series, is like political intrigue and much bigger stakes. So I just really wanted to say this phenomenon, the Blacklands, affects the entire world. I want to look at different aspects of different people and different walks of life. There's many portals in the off of the Florida coast, and in my world, that's what the Bermuda Triangle is. That's where all the portals first started coming. There's a huge concentration of portals out there. So I'd started taking notes on a short story that was basically, well, what does the commercial fishing industry looks like out there? So it's really just it's a story about fishermen fishing in the Bermuda Triangle. So it's like the perfect storm meets destroy all monsters. It's just like it's just mashups of everyday people in a world where like paranormal has become the norm. How does it affect the everyday man and woman or child?
We'll have to read and go fish. I know I'm not fishing anymore, so that's all there is to that. So you mentioned a little bit about the comics and stuff like that. I remember in your bio you used to write a comic when you were younger.
Yes, yeah. When I was 12 years old, I actually had a comic strip in our local newspaper. I've always loved comic strips, and actually, that's what I thought that I was going to do when I was younger. That I was going to be a comic strip writer. I was obsessed with Calvin and Hobbes. My dad bought me the Essential Calvin and Hobbes, which was a collection of the first two Calvin and Hobbes books, for Christmas. And I must have been 11 or 12, and I was just blown away. And I just absolutely loved it. I loved the artwork. I loved the stories. And so I just created this comic called Sticks and Stone, which is about a snake named Sticks and his pet rock. And they just lived in a forest, and they just, did stuff, had adventures. It was very simple, but I think that's, in my mind, the best comics were the simplest ones. And I did that for a few years, and I got it into our local paper, and I quit it. I remember when and why I quit it. I quit it my first year of high school, grade 9, because everybody teased me about it at school. So
I saw your answer coming before you said it.
Yeah.
Said high school.
Yeah, it was brutal. Because I was really proud of it. Like, it was in the paper. I lived in this town called Whitby, so it wasn't really a small town. I would say it was maybe 60,000 people at that time. But like, everyone at the school knew who I was. My picture was always next to me. Ian Rogers, 12-year-old, 13-year-old Whitby resident, was there. So like, everyone knew who I was. And they called me Sticks. That was my nickname all through high school because of the snake, and because I was really skinny. Like, I'm still skinny now, but I was really short and skinny then. And the funny thing is that I didn't like the teasing. I didn't care about the nickname, because actually, as far as nicknames go, I got off pretty easy. I think Sticks was okay.
It could be worse.
And even now, on Facebook, when people look me up, I still get called Sticks every now and again. Hey, Sticks, I saw you on Facebook. Hey, Sticks, I saw your Netflix news. So it's funny how they've all retconned their, oh, I knew you would do something great. It was like, you guys teased me mercilessly. I'm not bitter about it. Kids, it wasn't awful. Like, I didn't get beaten up, and no one laid a hand on me. But I did quit. I did quit because it was easier to not do it and not endure the teasing than it was to think, wow, I'm going to do this for the next 4 years until I graduate. Nope.
No, I totally get that. I was actually watching an interview with I don't know if you ever do any stuff on Twitch, but there's a guy named Ludwig. He was talking about the fact that he started out, he was actually a streamer, and then he got to college and people picked on him for it, and he was teasing him all the time. So he quit for years before he came back. But yeah, it's adolescence can be, I wish I wouldn't even say adolescence by the time you're in high school, but yeah, it can be a pain in the butt. But it's good to see. Hey, if you were drawing comics, maybe we wouldn't have these stories. And I'm telling you, absolutely love the stories. I am totally back into the horror genre now.
Well, thank you. And
Uh,
it's cool. I mean, when I look back and when I looked at my bio, and it's like, well, I did this comic when I was 12, and I was on this radio show when I lived in Toronto because I was like a teenage UFO investigator. And then this case that I was involved with that came back to haunt me because it was on Unsolved Mysteries. They did a documentary about it like 25 years later. So I was on this big CBC documentary that was, you could argue that the documentary was actually about me. So I mean, that you can actually see online. So I mean, this was aired all across Canada last year. So they just came and looked me up because I was one of the people that was still alive. Because again, 30 years ago, a lot of these investigators had since passed on, or they didn't want to talk about it, or they only knew a piece of the story. Where I knew this whole crazy mixed up thing. Where I was one of the people that was sort of involved with exposing this big UFO case as a hoax. And the fact that my father was involved in the RCMP at the time, and there was an RCMP component to this case. So when these people came to me and they said, would you be willing to be in this documentary? And I said, sure. And I said, I went and actually was able to find all my old case files and stuff because I'm a pack rat and I don't throw anything away. And I ended up doing more and more research for them. So I was almost working on the documentary. And then by the time the documentary started to morph into this thing where it started to become about me returning to the case after 25 years. So they came up and they filmed with me for like 4 or 5 days. They came up a few months later to do reshoots. And I was like, how much of this thing am I going to be in? And when they actually showed it to me, and it's a great production, it looks great. It looks really, really slick, but I'm all through it. So, I mean, I wasn't expecting that. So it's a little weird, it's a little uncomfortable, but I mean, it's just one of these sort of wacky things in your life that just sort of happened where it's like, I almost forget sometimes because I'm not involved in ufology or anything anymore. Like I was always, I like to say that I started out a Mulder and grew up into a Scully. I've always been pretty skeptical, but there's just not really a lot going on in ufology anymore. There hasn't really been any like big cases like a Roswell, in years and years. So I don't even really keep a toe in terms of what the big cases are these days. So when these guys sort of came to me out of the blue, I'm like, why would you want to do a story on this? But it was such a weird, unusual case. And again, there was this resurgence because Unsolved Mysteries came back on the air on Netflix itself. That it turned out that this segment was one of their most watched episodes, and you can still see it on YouTube and stuff. That they wanted to this Canadian company wanted to revisit this case, 25 years later. It was just weird.
I will let you know, I did look for it. It is not available in the US at this point in time, at least.
Yeah, it's geocached, so you'd have to have a VPN or something if you want to watch it on YouTube. Unfortunately, I'm still in touch with the producers, and they said that again, I think it might have just been a COVID thing. They haven't been able to sell the rights internationally because they thought for sure everyone would snap this up. So it only aired a year ago. So I'm sure it'll find a home somewhere in the States eventually. And then I'll give it another big push on social media. Because yeah, it was hard to sort of really promote it because it was literally almost a year ago. I think it was like end of March it came out of 2021. And it was really hard to promote it when a good chunk of my friends in the States weren't able to see it. So they could go online, they could see the pictures, they could see the trailer. I wrote an essay on the CBC website so they could read that, but it was all sort of like a tease. It was a tease because they couldn't watch the thing.
Yep. It happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I am hoping to watch that at some point because it did sound interesting. Carp, was that the right name?
Yeah, Carp, Ontario, which is such an Ontario Canadian sounding name. It was, of course, lends itself to all kinds of great clickbait headlines that would have been really great if there wasn't internet back when the case was going on. Something smells fishy about this UFO case, and of course there was because it was all a big hoax.
Yeah, I think the hoaxes. It's harder to pull off the hoaxes now because, I mean, let's face it, most of the hoaxes are usually done on really poor film cameras. And everybody's got a phone these days. And nobody believes you if you have a blurry photo anymore.
Well, and that's why I think that is also a large reason of why we haven't seen a big UFO case in a really, really long time, because you're right. You can fake something now, not even with complicated or expensive software, but just filters on your phone and the fact is you don't even need to do a good one because people just believe everything these days. Like belief culture has just kind of gone bonkers. Like we have flat earthers again. How did that happen? That there are now people that believe that the earth is flat and they have an actual movement again online. Like how have we reached that level? But it's like alien abduction, you never hear about that anymore. It was so prevalent in the 80s and 90s. And then the minute that everyone had a phone with a camera on it, and then now with like an HD video camera on it, like my phone takes better pictures than my SLR camera. It's
Oh yeah.
just, but and now suddenly no more alien abduction. No one talks about it. Like back in the day, everyone and their dog was getting abducted. Now no one.
Well, I still can't believe in the flat Earth thing, and mainly, let's face it, you can prove it. You have 3 cats. If the
Mhm.
Earth was flat, everything would have been knocked off by now.
That is
There's no
exactly
way.
true.
All right. Well, I don't know. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would hoped I'd asked?
No, I appreciate your interest in my work. Thank you for trying to track down as much as you can. All I can say is that I'm making major efforts to make available the stuff that's out of print. Every House is Haunted with the Netflix movie is the big one. I'd feel pretty bad if that movie finally comes out, or even if movie news starts to drop, and it should be starting to drop any day now. Casting, everything else. Those are the next big things. Those will be the next big news drops over the next few months or so. I would feel pretty bad if I wasn't able to say, oh, the book's going to be coming out soon. It's
Mhm.
that was always my fear, is that the movie's out, but the book isn't available because I wasn't able to sell the reprint rights. So I'm excited about that. I'm hopeful that the Blacklands will find a new home sometime soon. That's our next project. I'm doing some edits on a standalone horror novel that we're going to try with. We're going to send on submission again because I had this interest with the big 5 publishers with Sycamore, with the Blacklands. They just didn't want to make the commitment on the series. I've got this standalone horror novel that I'm hoping will win them over, because I still want to try them. I love the small presses. There's some great ones out there, but I would still like to have that big book, with a bigger press. So it's kind of it's like a supernatural, like a woodsy apocalypse book called The Underwood.
Okay.
That I'd sort of describe it as Blair Witch Project meets Jacob's Ladder, I guess would be my elevator pitch on that one. So it's dark. It's really creepy. Yeah, it's again, I don't want to describe it too much, because again, I don't want to
Good for
oversell, and I don't
everybody.
want to spoil anything. So, but I say it's a standalone horror book, and I've got a couple that are like that in the works right now. And obviously, I'm very quickly trying to finish the rest of the 8, because I've got that momentum. When Go Fish was published a couple of years ago, it had been like more than 10 years since I had written The House on Ashley Avenue. So it was like, oh, I forgot about these characters, and I can't even remember why I decided to write Go Fish. I knew that was going to be the next one, but something just popped in my head, and then the story just came out in a day or two. That's how I write, is in these really frantic bursts. I get the idea, and then my fingers have to catch up with my brain, just sort of, because it's pouring out of me like lava. And then I decided, even without the Netflix thing, I just said, I want to finally finish this story. I know what's going to happen with these characters. I know how it's going to end. I think it could always change, no, I outline, but no outline is written in stone. Things change along the way. They often do. But I want to get it done. I want to get this book done, and then have that story told and finished, so I can move on, because it's the urgency of a story that you want to write. Even while I was working on these 8 stories, I had an idea last week, and it was, I don't write a lot of science fiction, but I had an idea for this kind of an apocalyptic science fiction story. So I just wrote it. I wrote that over the past week, and it ended up being like 12,000 words. And I have no idea what I'm going to do with it. I might try and send it to tor.com or something, because again, at 12,000 words, you can't really send it a lot of places. It's too long for a short story. It's too short for a novel, that sort of a thing. So, and that's unfortunately, a lot of my stories are that long, but I really liked it. And it was a story that I had to write really urgently. And it just sort of poured out of me. And it was just weird, because also as a science fiction story, I don't write a lot of science fiction. It was different for me too. So you write the story that you feel that most passionate about at the time, or at least that's how I do it. You sort of take the path of least resistance, and you I guess some people call it the muse. I just call it like passion, like your fuel. It's the one thing that no one can teach you. Like people can teach you how to write. They can teach you proper grammar. They can teach you how to write a submission letter to an editor or an agent. But the one thing that you can't teach anyone is passion. It's what I say to people all the time. I look at writing like throwing, like playing darts, and the bullseye, I guess, is success, like whatever form your success takes, whether it's money or awards or whatever, but you're trying to hit that bullseye. So you're throwing the dart at the bullseye. And what I tell people is that what you have to remember in this analogy is that you don't bank everything on one book or one story, like, or one dart, you know, because if you do and then you miss, it's going to feel like you've lost, you're a big failure. It's just the first start. You have to keep throwing it, and you have to keep throwing it over and over again. And the funny thing is that anyone who hears that analogy thinks that the point is, oh yeah, you keep doing that because you'll get better, and that's true. And then one day you'll hit the bullseye, and that's also true. But the point I was always trying to reach with that analogy was that ultimately the reason why you're doing it, hopefully, is that you really like playing darts. You know, so like, you know, you're doing it because you love to do it. And at my darkest times, and even with the Netflix thing, I mean, I've had my highs and lows. I mean, it's I keep telling people over time, over the past year, like, never feel sorry for a guy with a Netflix deal. But it doesn't mean that all these doors are flying open for me, because they're not. I still have to work my ass off, and there's still lots of rejection. But I do it because I love it. And on the days that I don't love it, I just don't do it. I don't quit. I don't make any huge proclamations. I'm never going to do this again. I'm no good. I say that sometimes, but my wife, who is my number one champion, doesn't put up with any of that. So she's like, I understand you're feeling bad. Watch a movie, go game for a couple hours, go to sleep. You will feel better tomorrow. And she's always right. I mean, because she's right about everything, because she's way smarter than I am. But I mean, that's part of the support system. The support system isn't just someone telling you you can do it, or someone who just reads your work. It's someone who knows your BS and knows all the twists and turns that you might not necessarily show yourself, because you're the one you're in the maze, you know. And your support system is often outside of it, sort of saying, oh no, I know, I see where you're going there, and I see what's going to happen. You need to slow down or stop moving and just take a breath. And she's just always been really, really good with that. And it also comes from knowing someone. We've been together for 20 years. It's such a cliche to say that I couldn't have done this without her, but I really couldn't have. And I wouldn't have wanted to, you know. It's just being able to share that success with your nearest and dearest is some of the best part of this, you know. And being able to talk to people like yourself and making new friends in this community, which is awesome. I've been in it for, geez, I would say 19 years now, 18 or 19 years since I sold my first story for money, I guess. I mean, I've been in it before that, trying to submit, but being really part of it, where my name is out there, my name is on a story, it's been reviewed. That's sort of when I saw myself as really entering the community, and I've made so many great friends. It's been a heck of a journey. You know, that's all I can say. It's awesome.
No, I totally appreciate that too. It's just kind of funny. My wife and I, we've been married since '99. Although I do have to say, I'm going to have to put your wife and my wife in contact with each other, because my wife has never told me to go game for a couple hours and to relax. Uh, but then, you know, I'm also not writing, you know, books that are getting on Netflix either. So that maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But a couple last things to follow up. I usually try to go for about an hour, and this is about how far we've gone.
Okay.
First of all, I just want to let you know, I don't just ask authors on here to be here. I read Shards first. That's what made me reach out to you, because I love the book. And I'll tell anybody who's watching this later, this will be on YouTube later. I've also started putting these on Apple Podcasts for people who want to listen and, you know, are too busy to sit down and watch a video. But anytime somebody's on here, that's also my recommendation. You know, maybe I haven't read all of their stuff, but I've read at least one book or one story that I've fallen in love with. And I'm like, I've got to talk to this person. I've got to pick their brain a little bit. I've got to introduce them to other people. Everybody knows, you know, no hard hitting journalism here. You know, it's like, so what did you do when you were 21 in college? No, we're not doing that here. We're just having fun. We're talking about books, and, you know, just letting people know that, you know, also an author is not just an author. You've got other stuff going on. We talked about the UFO thing a little bit. You've written the comics when you were younger, things like that. Everybody's multi faceted, and, you know, just to remember that, introduce them to the person behind them, because I think if you care about the author, you're much more into the books.
Oh, absolutely.
I know, for instance, and I'm not picking on him. Just, we all know that he writes like a new book every month. Patterson, you know, I feel like he's actually finally writing his memoir, and I feel like that's probably going to introduce people to him that are always like, oh, Patterson, it's another Patterson book.
Right.
And so I just wanted to introduce people to you, especially, you know, up there in the north. I don't think we get a lot of. I just think Americans, we get a little. We're a big, come on. Well, like, Canada's a big country too. We're a big country, and we kind of like, okay, this is in America, and we care about Americans. You can give us the occasional Nathan Fillion or Ryan Reynolds, and we'll take them. I'll give Justin Bieber back. I'm just kidding. Don't anybody tell Justin Bieber
Yeah,
I
we're,
said
we're
that.
taking we're taking no beepers back on that one.
Yeah,
Sorry, he's
yeah.
yours.
I'm sure we probably sent a few people up there too. You wanted to kick back, but anyhow, um, but like I said, I just wanted to point out that this is, a recommendation for me to you, for excuse me, for the audience to read your stuff. I love it. Yes, I did have to search a little bit to find some of your stuff, but it was totally worth it. Really looking for it. I'm hoping that the Netflix movie does a little kickstart, maybe get some of that stuff that's out of print back in print, gets people interested in your work, introduces you to them. One thing I do finish with every time, because let's face it, nothing against Amazon. After all, I'm on Twitch right now, and Amazon owns Twitch. But you don't go see your favorite author at Amazon. You go see your favorite author at a bookstore. You go get introductions at a bookstore. So I want to let you just give a shout out to whatever, local bookstore up there in Ontario or somewhere else that you've been. Just give a shout out to whatever bookstore, and I'll make sure they get a link in the YouTube description.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if they're like a little bookstore. I mean, up here, it's like our chain, our big chain here is sort of Chapters Indigo, and we have one here in the city where I live, Peterborough, and I've done signings there as well. I've actually had writers here, even from abroad. The Mike Carey, who's a British writer who wrote the introduction to Supernatural Tales, was here with his wife several years ago. But they also did a signing and a reading because he's done so many great books. He did that novel, The Girl with All the Gifts, that got turned into a movie. He did that graphic novel series, The Unwritten, which is fantastic. Him and his wife were just like fantastic people, incredible writers. So it was nice sort of bringing them to our big bookstore here in town. It's just they love writers. I mean, even when I go in there, they always get me to sign copies of the books of mine when they're in print, and they're there. They got the stickers on it, local author, signed by author. It's it's a big store. It's sort of like it's a chain, but it has that small town, that small store feel to it.
Oh no,
It's
exactly. Like I said, maybe I should have said brick and mortar. Just a shout out to a brick and mortar. Obviously,
yeah.
I did work at the Bookworm Omaha for years, so I do have a thing for the independent bookstores. But I also
Mhm.
worked for Books a Million, which was it's the second after Borders went down. It's the second biggest chain down here in the U.S. But just I love to give the shout out. Go in, people get in the book.
Oh yeah.
You don't necessarily browse on Amazon to find your next read. You go on
No, no.
Amazon to look for the book you're looking for.
Mhm.
Uh, Go out and talk to your local booksellers, though, and especially I love the fact that you meant the local authors thing, the little tags.
Mhm.
Any good bookstores got that on some of their favorite local authors. Hey, you want to read somebody here in town, support somebody local. Here it is. So I appreciate that. So I will get them. I will get them noted in the YouTube. They're up in Ontario. I'll
Mhm.
also give a shout out to, obviously I've already talked about the Bookworm, but we also talked about the Poison Pen. Since you're going down to Phoenix, hanging
Yes.
out in Scottsdale, I'll give them a little shout out and some links to your stuff as well. So feel free to look under there for that. I think that's all we've got for tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up about here. Like I said, if anybody who was watching, if you missed anything, feel free. This will be on YouTube sometime tomorrow and sometime on Apple Podcast far, far in the future because I just learned how to do that yesterday and I'm playing catch up. All right. Well, I do want to thank you, Ian, for hopping on here. Hope I did pronounce that correct, right? I didn't even ask. Ian Rogers.
Oh, that's it. You
Okay.
got it. Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And like I said, we're hopefully, if you make it big and this movie kicks off and we get some more books on here, I might just have to ask you to come back.